Pulitzer Prize-winning historian Doris Kearns Goodwin has researched American presidents for a half-century. She got her big break back as a 24-year-old White House fellow for President Lyndon Johnson and went on to help write his memoirs. Over her career, she's written extensively about the lives of Presidents Abraham Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt, and Franklin Roosevelt. In her new online masterclass course, she teaches how leadership qualities can define a commander-in-chief. And she joins us now. Doris, good morning.
Glad to be with you.
Welcome back.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I want to get into the masterclass, but before I do that, I want a little dose of perspective here. Historians always talk about how, as troubled as our times today may seem, and by many measures they are very troubled indeed, the past was worse. Please tell me how.
Yeah, there was an old woman on the plane who said to me, "Tell me, you're an historian, where times are really worse." So I started talking about the 1850s were worse. We had this partisan press. You only believed what newspaper you were reading, the Republican, the Democratic, or the Whig. And then she said, "But that didn't end up too well. It was the Civil War." So I said, right. Oh, I'll tell you about another time. No, but in truth, it is true. I mean, think about Lincoln coming in and the Civil War is about to begin, the Great Depression, World War II in the early days. Somehow democracy gets through these things, and we have to believe that.
And one of the ways in which you say in the masterclass that democracy can come through is if we make sure that we know each other. And one of the ways to solve that in the present day would be a volunteer program. Why do you think that's so important? I
feel so strongly. If I could do one thing, like in my 50 years of being in this kind of life as an historian, it would be to have a national service program. Just think, Teddy Roosevelt warned that the reason democracy will fail is if people in the other part of the country think of themselves as the other, different sections. If you're in a national service program, you're not going to the Peace Corps abroad necessarily. You're going from the city to the country. You're hosted by a family. You're learning how to deal with national disasters. You're helping mentoring people. You get time off from college or for college tuition. You would just know what military people get. When my son joined the Army right after 9/11, nothing will equal that. He had just graduated from Harvard. He learned to be in a platoon with all sorts of people. It'd be great for us to understand each other again. That's
and you
what
become
we need.
Invested in the country in a different way.
And in civics, which we should be teaching it in school, and we should be learning it in such ways like this.
What are the characteristics of an effective leader, would you say?
I think there are a bunch of them. I think there's actually a family resemblance from my guys that I studied over these 50 years. I talk about them that way. There is, I promise. So humility is one.
Yes.
The ability to
humility, that's an interesting one.
You acknowledge your errors, you learn from your mistakes. Empathy is so important, to be able to see other people's points of view. Resilience to get through adversity. The ability to create a team where people can argue with you, where you can share credit and you can shoulder blame. And I think most importantly is the ambition for self becomes an ambition for something larger in the transformative leaders.
So humility, acknowledging errors. When you mention that in the context of past presidents, you think of the current president, who famously does not say "I'm sorry," does not acknowledge errors, is not known for his humility. Is he casting a new mold of presidential leadership, or what?
I don't know. It seems to me the most important thing with all those qualities is the ability to grow. If you have humility and empathy, you can learn. You can learn in office. You're not going to change fundamentally once you become president, but you're hoping that leaders grow. And it's hard to grow if you can't acknowledge errors, because then you're never wrong. So what are you going to learn from?
Have you gotten a chance to speak to President Trump?
No. I'd love to. I mean, I've spoken to many of the other presidents. And
what would you say to him?
I think what I'd say to him is, can I bring Lincoln and Teddy Roosevelt and Franklin Roosevelt and LBJ in to talk to you tonight? I'd rather they be able to talk to him than me, but I'll channel them, and you listen to them, and they'll teach you something.
One story you tell is about President Lincoln writing what you call hot letters to his staff. What exactly?
So he'd get mad at somebody, right? And instead of yelling and screaming at them, he would write a letter in which he expressed all of his anger to General Meade after he failed to follow up with General Lee's army. "I'm immeasurably distressed. You didn't do what I asked you to do. The war's going to go on forever now." And then he put the letter aside, hoping he would cool down psychologically, and never send it. So we never even saw these until the 20th century.
Wow.
And suddenly you see a whole bunch of letters to people. And the interesting thing is, I was talking to President Obama about this when I did an exit interview. I said, "Do you ever think of doing that?" He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, do you do that?" He said, "I do it all the time." I said, "What do you mean?" He writes letters and then throws them in the basket, and they never went anywhere.
It's like the draft folder of one's tweets.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly.
Cold tweets rather than hot tweets.
All right. Great story. Doris Kearns Goodwin, thank you so much for being here this morning.
You're so welcome.
Her new masterclass is available online now.